Now, this entire parasha is talking about building the Mishkan, all of the things we talked about in the last couple of parashot, all of the construction of the Mishkan, the menorah, the Aron HaKodesh, all of the different amazing things that were there. And the whole parasha talks about the details. But yet, in the beginning of the parasha, Hashem sticks a couple of sentences in there that seem like they don't fit. Where it says Moshe assembled the entire assembly of the children of Israel, and he said to them, these are the things that Hashem commanded to do them. Now we're thinking, oh yeah, we're going to continue what we already been doing for the last couple of weeks, building the Mishkan. No. For 6 days work may be done, but the 7th day shall be holy for you, a day of complete cessation before Hashem. Anyone who does work on it shall be executed. You shall not light fire in any of your dwellings on the Shabbat day. And then it goes back to the Mishkan. That's it. So we have one of the 12 times in the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us and warns us about Shabbat and how a Jew must observe every Shabbat without exception, and those that violate it at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, at the time of the Sanhedrin, would be executed. Today it's a spiritual death penalty. What's a spiritual death penalty? Tragedies you don't want to know of. Well, a person would die young, before the age of 50, or would live to see his own children die, and all types of horrible things that are, in essence, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fulfills the death penalty. As the Gemara tells us, even though the Sanhedrin is no longer here to implement the 4 different types of death penalties, according to the Torah, that does not mean that the death penalty is no longer valid. It just means that Hashem took over. And He implements them in different ways. He doesn't kill right away. Just like the Beit Din, that has a strategy of how they do certain things. There has to be a warning. There has to be an explanation. The person has to know what they're doing and what the ramifications are. There has to be witnesses. Same thing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where He also has a system of when He decides to execute somebody. But the question still remains, what is it doing here? These couple of sentences about Shabbat seem like they don't fit. If you told me about this in next week's parasha, the week after, fine. But why is it here? And especially, it's only a couple of sentences. You have to keep Shabbat. We heard already, we have to keep Shabbat. We've been hearing about Shabbat already for the entire book of Exodus. Why do we have to be reminded of it again? That's because, Rabotai Yekarim, in last week's parasha, we learned about the horrible sin that Am Yisrael made, the mistake by following the Erev Rav with the golden calf. The golden calf sin is something that Am Yisrael is still suffering for until today. This idolatry was something awful that Am Yisrael had to get punished for in different ways. Those that mamash worshiped the idol, they got killed by the water that Moshe Rabbeinu made them drink. Those that sinned a little bit, the Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu and the Levi tribe killed them with the sword. Killed them with the sword. Those that thought about sinning, they didn't quite sin, but they thought it's a good idea. They're on the way to go do it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu killed them with the plague. The plague that followed. But then there was those that didn't sin, but they watched their brothers and sisters, their fellow Jews, sin, and they didn't say anything. They didn't rebuke, and they're being punished until today for that. As the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat says, that if a Jew sees another Jew making a biblical sin, he must rebuke him, and if he doesn't, he'll get the same punishment as him. In so many words, he's considered as if he sinned himself. So, after this golden calf, and Hashem forgave us, but with a condition, we need a tikkun. We need a rectification. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reminds us, the rectification for Avodah Zarah is observing Shabbat. When you observe Shabbat, like you're supposed to, you know the laws, you know what to do, you're celebrating Shabbat, it's not like a burden on you, you learn Torah on Shabbat, you're not talking business on Shabbat, that's a tikkun for Avodah Zarah. And what is it doing here? Because we need a tikkun for the mistake we made in Parashat Ki Tisa, and therefore, before we get into building the Mishkan, we have to know observing Shabbat is required in order for you to turn your own house into a house of Hashem. This is why Rule 101, for all people that want to be in love with Hashem, and for Hashem to be in love with them, for them to have a share in the world to come, for their TeShuva to even begin, they must observe Shabbat. Without observing Shabbat, no mitzvah that you're doing is going to be rewarded in Olam Haba. Why? Because you have no Olam Haba that's good. Any mitzvah that you do, you'll get rewarded in this world. Because a Jew that does not keep Shabbat has no share of the world to come. So here HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, yes, I want you to build the house of Hashem, the Mishkan, but I also want you to turn your house 3,000 years later into a house of Hashem. You want it to be a house of Hashem? It begins with Shabbat. It begins with Shabbat. You want to do TeShuva? It begins with Shabbat. You don't keep Shabbat? No TeShuva. Now is TeShuva, is Shabbat enough? It's a big mitzvah. But it's not enough to remove a person from the klipa. That's why the parasha continues with more details. We must reach such a high level of kedusha through Torah learning and good deeds that we finally realize everything comes from Hashem. The decree didn't come from Haman, and the salvation didn't come from Mordecai. Everything is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All your problems are not caused by others. It's Hashem talking to you, trying to get your attention.